Hey, g'day! Hunters are the new mages, except even better. In this video, I'm going to guide you through how you can make some massive AOE pulls in Uldaman as a solo hunter on mobs that can drop rare and valuable items, such as the Pendulum of Doom. We're going to be going in the back entrance of Uldaman, since that's where the good mobs are. Once we're inside, we're going to dismiss our pet, and we're going to make sure that we've got Chimera Shot equipped. We will be using Explosive Shot for almost all of this place, but we do have to kill a few individual mobs before we can get to the mobs that we're really wanting to be AOE grinding. The first of those mobs is the Obsidian Sentinel. He's basically the guardian at the back door, and he's a little bit like a boss, except without any good loot. As you kill him, he's going to spawn little ads, but neither him nor his ads really do anything important. So what we're going to do is we're going to kite him using the same spot that we'll be using for our AOE pulls, and it's a bit of a nice chance just to practice while the enemy isn't too scary. The basic premise is this ledge here, where we can jump up, but mobs have to go the long way around. We can make a bit of a triangle pattern, where we jump up and to the left, then we strafe right, and then we drop down and repeat. As long as we're doing that, the mobs can never hit us. And while we're in this little triangle pattern, we are out of line of sight, which will be useful for when we're going to be fighting some casters later, but we will need to be aware that we'll just need to shimmy just a little bit to the right when we actually want to be shooting things. So we'll just kite the Obsidian Sentinel and kill him, and then we have a few just slightly tricky mobs to deal with. What we want to do for these is use a nice little bit of a combo, which is Wyvern Sting plus Chimera Shot. Wyvern Sting deals 300 damage over 6 seconds when the sleep breaks, but that damage can actually be extended with Chimera Shot, going to 100 damage every 2 seconds for 15 seconds, or however long you keep refreshing it. Now you can only do the initial shooting of the Wyvern out of combat, but it will make killing that first enemy of the pack very, very fast. And that will be important here, because the mobs we're going to be fighting first, these Shadowforge Relic Hunters, they have a heal, they also have a powerful instant cast damage over time, and they can also silence you, which is going to prevent you from laying any more traps. Since they are a bit of a pain, we're going to be doing very small pulls just for these mobs. But don't worry, there's only a few that we have to deal with, and then we can get onto the really nice larger pulls. In the first pull of Relic Hunters, we're going to have 2 of them. Plus we'll also have a Shadowforge Geologist, which has a ranged Flame Lash attack, and it also has a Flame Spike, which puts fire on the ground. Despite the annoyances of those 2 mobs, if you pull small enough and you focus on bringing them down fast, they shouldn't pose too much of a threat. Then, after the 3 pull, we're going to be killing 1 single Relic Hunter, which will be super fast, because we can just Wyvern Sting it again. And you barely need to kite this one, it's just going to die so quickly by the time you get to the kite spot, it's probably gonna. Then once that's clear, we're ready to start doing some big pulls. Here, you'll want to make sure you switch from that Chimera Shot we were using earlier to Explosive Shot. Unfortunately, I did actually forget to do that this run. If you do forget, you don't actually necessarily need to abandon the pull. It will just be a little bit slower, since you'll only have Explosive Trap for damage, rather than Explosive Trap plus the Explosive Shot. So I use Eyes of the Beast, and I'm going to run my pet all the way north, and I'm going to make sure I aggro all of the bats on the way up. I'm going to run into the little Scorpid pit and aggro the Scorpids. Fortunately, this time it didn't aggro properly for me. There's a bit of a funny mechanic here, where your pet only aggroes things around them every few seconds, unless they actually attack it. So even though my pet got really close, since it didn't hit the Scorpid, I didn't aggro. Sometimes they're going to aggro instantly, it's just random. No worries though, I'm just going to get them on the way back. I'll continue up to the Stonevaults, and then it's up to you how much of this room you want to pull at a time. The basic rule of thumb I have is that brawlers, they don't matter at all. You could aggro 1 of them, you could aggro 100 of them, it would be the same difficulty pull. But the tricky part is the Geomancers, since they're casters. You want to try not to aggro too many of them, especially while you're learning. While you're learning, I'd actually only aggro 1, and then as you get more used to it, you can get more and more at a time. In this pull, I'm going to start with just grabbing 1, and then later pulls this run, I'm going to show you 3 and then 5 to show you that also. Once I've got them, I'm just going to pop back and get those corpses that I missed earlier, and then I'm just going to let my pet die. Sometimes you can save it by cancelling Eyes of the Beast, setting your pet to stay, and then running a bit away to break the range of your pet and have it despawn. But realistically, it's just usually going to die, and it's really not that big of a deal. We're not going to be using it for the actual kill phase anyway. But once you are in the kite spot, I'm going to lay a frost trap and an explosive trap on this little corner here, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm out of line of sight. I've marked it with this red line I've drawn on, and then I'm also going to make sure that I use a target macro to target the Geomancer, since he's the annoying caster that we're going to want to try and kill first. Once the first of the mobs get kind of close, I'm going to jump up and start making the triangle pattern. Now you'll need to duck out to fire off the shots and plant more traps, but just make sure that when you see the Geomancer start casting on you, you want to make sure that you're out of line of sight before the cast finishes. Now that Geomancer has two casts, the Fireball, which does heavy damage, and a Flame Buffet, which does quite light damage, but it also puts a debuff on you that makes you take more fire damage. Getting hit by the odd cast is not a worry at all, but if you get hit a lot, you can die very quickly due to that debuff stacking up on you. When you have a pool of a lot of casters, it becomes more and more important to make sure you're never getting hit, but with one, I can be a little bit bold here. Then once the Geomancer is dead, I don't have to worry about line of sight at all, and I can be very aggressive with my shooting. And the pull also becomes a lot easier, so I'm actually going to speed it up, since it's really, you're just making that same pattern over and over until everything dies. And now that everything's dead, I'll equip my explosive shot that really I should have equipped earlier. And then after looting, I'm ready to do a pull with a few more casters. I'll head up, I'll res my pet, I'll make sure I get it nice and full HP. I'm actually going to pre-lay a couple of traps, and then I'm going to Eyes of the Beast to make the next pull. Once I get into the room, I'm just going to keep a bit of a count of how many Geomancers I'm getting. I have one in the first group, I have one up here by the tent, and then I have one in the archway. I'm going to get close enough to that one, and then cancel Eyes of the Beast. So it's going to be a 3 caster pull, which is a bit of a big step up from a 1 caster pull, but it's not the most that it's possible to do. I want to get a target on one of the Geomancers, and then I'm going to head back to the kite spot. One thing to watch here is the little campfire. If you step on it with Cheetah on, you're going to get dazed. That's unlikely to result in death, since the mob should be well behind, but it's best to avoid it anyway. And then we're going to drop our traps on the corner, and we're going to start off out of line of sight on the ground level. Once the mobs get close, we'll jump up and we're going to begin the kite. Now this is a decent sized pull, so we do want to make sure that we get our stack nice and close together. If you just do the triangle without showing your face, the mobs do tend to pack up a bit closer together, and then when you're running out and getting into line of sight, that'll tend to make them spread out a bit. And that's going to be especially with the casters, since they'll stop moving to cast, so they can get a little bit spread from the melee mobs. In the first part of the kill phase, I'm going to be mostly stacking them up, just doing a little bit of explodey shot and traps, but of course still making sure to always have a frost trap up. That's super important. When you see the casters cast on you, make sure you're not just ducking out of line of sight, but you need to make sure you stay out of line of sight long enough that definitely all of the casters have finished their cast. It's better to be super conservative with this than to get hit a bunch and die. Now while we do this kite, I'm going to go over the melee mobs. They're the Stonevault Brawler and the Stonevault Mauler, and they have the same abilities. They have an Enrage, which makes them hit very hard, and they have a Thrash that gives them bonus attacks when they haven't hit you for a while. Between the two of those abilities, if you ever get hit by one, there's a real chance that they can just cleanly straight up one-shot you. Make sure you don't get hit. Now you may notice that I'm laying these traps really fast. I use a lay trap at mouse cursor macro, so I don't have to hit the trap keybind and then click where I want it to go. Rather, I can just position my mouse where I want the trap, hit the macro keybind, and it lays the trap there straight away. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but when you're really trying to stay out of line of sight as much of the time as possible and you're going to be moving a lot, it does make it way faster. And that's really all there is to say about that pool. The rest is just going to be kiting and shooting. So, time for some dancing monkeys. Okay, in this pool I have 5 Flameweavers, which are caster mobs. They're pretty similar to the Geomancers, except their cast is an immolate, which leaves a dot on you, and it hits like a truck, and it will stack. I make this pool nice and okay. I get to set up in my kite spot, and I make my triangle to stack the mobs. And it's all going smooth for a little while, but now look what happens. Keep your eyes on this Flameweaver here. I jump down, but actually it doesn't register that I've moved, so the mobs keep chasing me from the top. This makes that Flameweaver get awfully close to me. If he does get all of the way to the corner of the top, he's going to be in line of sight of my little kite spot, and he's just going to stand there forever casting on me. If that does happen, I actually just have to run out the instance portal, which fortunately is nearby, but they would abandon the pool. Or there's a good chance I might just die. One of the two is going to happen. Now my best theory for this behavior is that on my game client, when I move my character, it updates the position on my screen instantly, and it then tells the server my new location. The server is the one that's in charge of determining how mobs move, and it knows what coordinates are up and what coordinates are down to make the mobs change direction. If I move a very small amount from where the server thinks I am, the client probably doesn't bother to send that message to the server telling it I've moved, so the Blizzard server thinks I'm just in a slightly different spot to where I really am on my screen. To get around this, I just need to move a little bit more. Either move a bit further away from the top, or even just wiggling back and forwards a bit seems to fix it. So now I need to stay a little bit down more to make sure the mobs get a bit further away from me, and then once they are, I'll do the triangle a bunch just to make them stack up again properly. And I do this bit a little bit imperfectly actually. There's a few times that I fall straight back down rather than strafing, and I'm also spending a little bit too much time in line of sight, and as a result the mobs get a little bit spread. This is going to cause the other weird little behaviour that can potentially get me killed. Right, freeze frame. What do you think? Am I safe? There's an enraged trog getting a little close, but that's got to be pretty far away still, right? Well, watch what I'm going to do. I actually step back quite far, and I actually don't get hit. If I had, I probably would have been one shot. Between the keep chasing bug that we saw before, and the other fact that these guys have a really, really big hitbox when they're enraged, you have to be super careful with them. And actually, let's zoom ahead a bit, and we'll see an example where I didn't step back enough. Okay, freeze. What do you reckon? If I jump down now, that should be good, right? Look how far they are back. And they're not even enraged, actually. Whew, didn't die. So my big mistake there was actually the frost trap placement. It was a little bit too much to the right, and so it wasn't properly covering the mobs on the ledge. So when I jumped down, I got that keep chasing bug, and I got a smack for my troubles. Good thing they weren't enraged, I definitely would have died there. But then for the rest of the pool, I decided that maybe actually I should play good, and so I did, and the rest went pretty smooth. I will let the rest of this pool play out at normal speed without commentary, and then I'm going to cover what loot you can get for doing this, and what talents and runes I'd recommend. There'll be chapter marks if you wanted to skip to those sections. So what can we get for doing this? The first mob to look at is the Stonevault Brawler. From these you can get a Stonevault Bonebreaker, which is good for enhancement shamans, and it goes for around 50 to 200 gold. The Papal Fez is the non-crafted best in slot for healers, so anyone who doesn't go tailoring or leatherworking, they're going to want one, and they end up going for about a couple of hundred gold. Digmaster 5000, I'm not sure who wants these, but it does seem to be going for about 100 gold. And then Beacon of Hope is the pre-raid best in slot offhand for healers, but most healers do tend to go for two-handers, so it only goes for more like 30 to 50 gold. Finally, Monolithic Bow is absolute best in slot for warriors, and it can go for several hundred gold. Now Stonevault Maulers, despite being basically the same as the Brawlers to fight, do have a bit of a lesser drop table. You can still get the Monolithic Bow from them, which is the good one, and you can also get the Bonebreaker, but not the others. However, you can get a Ginsu Sword, and that goes for a little under 100 gold typically. Then the Geomancers only really have one interesting drop, and that's the Unearthed Bands. Now these ones, you want them to roll Strength, Agility, or Attack Power, and if they do, they can be a best in slot item for physical DPS. But if they don't, it's probably going to be pretty worthless. It's a bit hard to nail down a price for these, so you're just going to have to experiment a bit depending on what affix you get. Then those Shrike Bats that you pull on the way to the Stonevaults, they do have some good drops too. You can get that Monolithic Bow from them, or you can get an Unearthed Bands. Unfortunately, all of your other drops, they're not quite so good. Finally, the best for last. Stonevault Flameweavers can drop Pendulum of Doom. This is an iconic and powerful two-handed axe with a perfect 4.0 attack speed. Even though it's technically slightly worse than the Nomrigan Epic Axe, it does still fetch incredible prices, going for easily thousands of gold. It is incredibly rare though, and as far as I can determine, it only drops from the Flameweavers, so realistically you're probably not going to get one. What I do is I just think of it as kind of getting a few free lotto tickets whenever you do a run. Now, talents and runes. You'll want to be survival spec for this. Just a pretty standard one, but do make sure that you're not getting the entrapment talent. The problem with that one is it's going to cause the mobs to spread about too much when they get stuck. Then, for runes, we're going to go for Lone Wolf, since we won't be using a pet for the kill phase. We'll go for Explosive Shot, which is going to be our main damage source. Expose Weakness is going to be really good. It will have a massive uptime, since we're hitting so many targets and therefore lots of chances to crit. For legs, we're going to go for Serpent Spread. It is pretty whatever, but realistically every choice for the legs is pretty meh. And for the feet slot, Trap Launcher. It's an absolute must, since that's how we're going to be keeping the mobs perma-slowed with ranged frost traps in combat. So, final thoughts. This farm takes a bit of practice to get right, and you can make a fortune doing it, but you can also go a long time with no drops if you're unlucky. I do think that it's worth doing anyway, mostly because it's super fun to learn, but I would say that there are potentially better uses of this technique. One that's pretty well known is the Scarlet Monastery Cathedral 1 pull, although I would say that's more for boosting rather than getting any good loot from it. I do, however, have a farm that uses the same sort of technique with the kiting, and it is really good, consistent gold. That's going to be my next video, and if that's something you might be interested in, please do consider subscribing. Also, it helps me a lot. But until next time, bye for now.